So, hello and welcome back yet again to a slightly different thing that we are going to do today in honor of the Day of Love that it is. We are going to read some in game books that have been put in the game specifically to titillate and spur your creativity? Question mark. Yes, indeed. We are going to be reading through the steamy romance novels. And where better to sit and read the steamy romance novels than this lovely little dwarven house? Um, this is out in Airy Peak. It's one of my favorite little houses, and we're going to talk a little bit about the steamy romance novels. They are actually a series of kind of junk and joke books that were first introduced way back in the Burning Crusades, and they have just kept adding to them throughout the successive expansions. Um, Supposedly, Francis Sturbacon, Bill Spearshaker, and Noah Scribeson all claim to be the authors of the series. But Francis and Bill claim that they've grown tired of writing these novels, and so if you are an inscriptionist, you can actually take up the quill yourself and inscribe your own steamy romance novels. So if you're looking for a little bit of extra in-game gold and you would like to write yourself some steamy romance novels, you definitely can. So everybody, grab yourself a seat, throw another log on the fire, and we're going to start with the very first steamy romance novel, which was only titled A Steamy Romance Novel. As Nani glided up, the grizzled warrior gave her a hard stare. "I suppose you're here to collect the reward for killing those Murlocs?" Her eyes wandered down to the glowing broadsword at his side. "That depends on what the reward is, Marcus." She twirled her hair playfully, pretending not to notice how he shifted uncomfortably in her presence. "I may not want it." Marcus stepped towards her, bristling with a mixture of fear and anger. "The reward is not negotiable." He paused for a moment, while gathering his nerve, and pressed himself against her diminutive form. Their lips met hotly, melting her frost armor spell in a torrent of sweltering vapor. "So, is there another step to this quest?" she teased, her eyes glittering with excitement. This goes on for several hundred more pages without advancing the plot. And that was everyone's very first introduction to our hero Marcus and his series of interesting adventures. The second steamy romance novel, a steamy romance novel, Forbidden Love, can actually be obtained if you are a rogue by pickpocketing humanoids in Northrend. Additionally, Matar the Not-So-Smart in Jade Forest has a chance of dropping it. And so let's turn a page and read about Forbidden Love. Athusa crept silently through the massive underground tunnel, nervously looking over her shoulder in anticipation of the fast-moving tram. "Where is he?" she muttered angrily, stopping suddenly as something moved behind her. Her eyes narrowed dangerously as her dagger slid from its sheath. A husky voice echoed in the hollow chamber. "I thought rogues liked to be behind their target." She spun quickly, driving her blade into the shield of impenetrable force. "And I thought paladins were supposed to be chaste," she said with a smirk. Leaning forward, She counted out loud until the invisible bubble dissipated with an audible pop. 12 seconds. I know you have abilities that last longer than that. Bony fingers worked effortlessly beneath his armor, unlatching his breastplate and exposing him to the cold air. Don't worry, my sweet Marcus. That's not a finishing move tonight. I'm just getting started. He wrapped his arms around what remained of her waist, forcing an excited giggle as he nibbled at her neck vertebrae. The rest of this book has several sections that are apparently worn out from repeated readings. And that was the story of Marcus and an undead rogue in the Deep Run tram. Our next amazing romance novel can sometimes be gotten out of the bag of fishing treasures that are rewarded from completing Marcia Chase's daily fishing quests in Dalaran. And additionally, Matar, the not-so-smart in Jade Forest, can also sometimes drop a steamy romance novel, Northern Exposure. The tiny gnome peered over the railing into the secluded Dalaran courtyard. The view from the balcony is amazing! You have to come see! Armor leg plates creaked as Marcus walked over, taking in a deep breath as he absently scratched at his scruffy chin. The hero's welcome is no slouch, and there's something in the room that might interest you. Tavi bounded into the room, pausing only a moment before jumping onto the massive bed. She turned to gaze at Marcus with her huge, saucer-like eyes, narrowing them playfully and replacing her glowing smile with a diabolical grin. Interested in some more company? She purred, as her hands weaved through a complex summoning ritual, stopping only when she felt the warmth of a new presence behind her. All the color drained from Marcus's face as he struggled to protest. I don't think that's appropriate. Confused, Tavi turned to see what was wrong. A hideous fellhound stood ready, drooling on the floor as it stared intently at the half-armored paladin. No, that's not what I meant, she stammered as she dispelled the hungry minion. I'm sorry, that's not really my specialization. Marcus took both of her hands in one of his as he reassured her. It's fine. What is your specialization? Her head snapped up, eyes burning with renewed life as shadowy energy channeled through her hands into Marcus, dropping him to his knees in agony. Affliction, actually. Gritting his teeth, Marcus gestured as light flashed over him, restoring his strength. Tavi stared anxiously as he rose to his full height, engulfing her in his shadow. He thrust his hand forward, sending a wave of righteous force through her. Eyes rolled back as she wavered for several seconds before regaining consciousness. I have recently taken the path of retribution. The mischievous smirk returned to her face. Well then, this is going to be fun. The remaining pages have a level 999 requirement to read, and therefore we can't. But I'm sure that they go on for quite some time. Our next adventure that Marcus is going to indulge himself in can be obtained by pickpocketing Argent Confessor Paletress And, of course, Matar, the not-so-smart in Jade Forest, has a chance to drop it as well. And that is a steamy romance novel, Blue Moon. Tail swooshing and hips swaying, the curvy figure walked purposefully across the lake towards the man relaxing by the shore. Rising quickly as she approached, he appeared visibly happy to be in her presence. Blue arms flowed over his shoulders as a smooth tail coiled seductively around his waist. "Why must I travel so far to be meeting a man like you?" Her voice had a strong and alluring accent. Grinning wildly, he gently pushed her away, openly staring as the light caught her features. "Up here," she said in playful anger. With a helpless shrug, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small pouch. "My wonderful Sula, I've brought you something." Confidence wrapped his words like a steel blanket. She plucked the tiny bag from his hands, excitedly pulling it open and revealing a citrine pendant. "Oh, Marcus, you shouldn't have." The usual teasing was gone from his voice. "Every facet lights the sky and my heart with your beautiful reflection." Sula frowned. "Oh no, I mean you really shouldn't have. I could craft something better by accident." For the first time, possibly ever, Marcus looked hurt. His shoulders slumped slightly, the cocky, ever-present grin missing from his handsome face. Sula opened her mouth to speak, smiling warmly, and a glowing rune appeared above her eyes. "I don't think I can mend your feelings, even with my gift." Despite the statement, her words seemed to do the trick. Marcus smirked roguishly as he adjusted his leg plates. "Well, you aren't the only gifted one." Silence penetrated the room with a palpable force as the conversation shifted to the language shared by all races of Azeroth. Minutes became hours, until their passionate dialogue was interrupted by lightning streaking from the cloudless sky, thunderously slamming into the lake's surface and bathing them in steam. "Is something wrong?" Marcus said. "No, my Marcus. You are just off to a great start." The remaining pages have been thoroughly destroyed by the elements. Our next steamy romance novel, Big Brass Bombs, can be obtained by pickpocketing humanoids in Vashir, the Twilight Highlands, Oldham, and Deepholm. Additionally, as always, Matar the not-so-smart in Jade Forest can drop it when you take him out as well. So, on to Big Brass Bombs. The tough little goblin walked purposefully into the engineering shop, raising her eyebrows at a few items as she approached the shopkeeper. "How's it going, Jack?" Her voice seductively brushed his pointy ears with the rough texture of someone who had inhaled too much motorcycle exhaust. The goblin, called Jack, looked up and grinned. "Revy, it's going much better since you just arrived." Jack sent his arc light spanner onto the table. "What can I do you for?" Holding her elbow in one hand, Revy tapped her chin lightly. "I'm not real sure. You got any specials?" "Are you kidding? I got the best deals anywhere," Jack replied enthusiastically. "Just got in these morning. In all sorts of colors. Small red rockets, got some in blue and green too. Revy's disappointed look was not missed by the expert shopkeeper, and he quickly upped the ante. There was a loud thud as Jack dropped something on the table. I call it the big one, he said. It's goblin only. Very difficult to find. Nice. Very nice, said Revy, sounding unconvinced as her eyes wandered a bit. Okay, fine. I can see you're a goblin of superb taste. Jack looked around conspiratorially before he carefully laid out a new item, buckling the table with an ominous creak. It's called... Jack paused for dramatic effect. The bigger one. Revy's eyes grew wide in surprise. Is it real? Feeling the advantage, Jack allowed himself to relax a bit. Putting his hands behind his head and leaning back in his chair, he replied with lazily narrowed eyes. It's 100% goblin parts, baby! Natural resources. After a moment's hesitation, Revy reached out and gingerly stroked the smooth yellow surface. I'll take 2. Excellent. You know, if you like that, you might be interested in some hardened adamantite tubes. They can enhance the effect. Revy nodded excitedly and looked behind Jack at something on the wall. What is that? Jack looked over his shoulder. Oh, those are for reviving dead people. Revy was intrigued. Can they be used on someone while they're still alive? Never wanting to miss a sale, Jack responded without missing a beat. Oh, sure. Tell you what, you get all this stuff and I'll throw in a pair of mayhem protection goggles for half price. Revy pulled out a stack of coins that made Jack drool. Why not? Motorcycle sales have been good this year. As Jack quickly tallied the total, he said, This must be a serious raid or something. Revy shrugged. Nah, I got a blind date with a guy named Marcus tonight. Jack nodded. What about that guy from the motor club you was dating? The leather-clad goblin scooped up her bag with one arm and held up an outstretched hand. He never put a ring on it. A girl's gotta have her priorities. Jack smiled and shook his head as he watched her walk out of the shop. The remaining pages require a secret goblin decoder ring to read. And that was Big Brass Bombs. Unfortunately, no Marcus in that one except by mention, but I'm sure that will change again. Our next steamy romance novel is Hot and Misty. It's a item that you can pickpocket from humanoids in Mists of Pandaria level content, and, of course, Matar, the not-so-smart in the Jade Forest, could potentially drop it for you as well. Marcus galloped on his warhorse towards the remote building, bringing an almost imperceptible flush to one of the curvier guards as he passed. He dismounted and handed his reins to the ever-present stablemaster, placing one hand on her shoulder before speaking. Kama, have you considered our last conversation? Marcus asked, furrowing his eyebrows in mock seriousness. Kama rolled her eyes, her Pandaren markings exaggerating the movement. I doubt my life mate would think much of it. Marcus let out a bellowing laugh, looking over his shoulder as he walked away. I'd still like to meet her one day. The Tavern of the Mists was unusually crowded, and he pushed his way through the crowd till he stood in the shadows of a dark corner. An exotic voice purred his name. Marcus, it's good to see you again. Marcus smiled and squinted his eyes as they adjusted to the absence of light. Madame Goya, the pleasure is all mine. She dipped a polite bow. Marcus felt a sudden warmth as he was reminded of why the term bouncy was so often used to describe the Pandaren. He bowed in kind, catching Madame Goya's hand and kissing it gently, never shifting his eyes away from the hulking bodyguard standing behind her, a single scar between his watchful eyes. So, Marcus, can I interest you in something special? I'm afraid the usual cannot be offered today. Marcus did not miss her emphasis on the usual, nor the deep regret that laced her words. Their eyes met once again, and she squeezed his hand before letting go. If that is your will, may I see what you have to offer? Marcus asked. There are several magnificent pieces of army, a tiny companion, and even an exotic mount, Madame Goya answered, her typical playfulness quickly returning. She paused and held a hand to her chin, feigning thoughtfulness. But my most valuable treasures are located upstairs. Marcus's eyebrows lifted comically, and his eyes widened before his expression settled into gleeful acceptance. Until we meet again, then. Her eyes fluttered, and Marcus found himself walking up the stairs of the strange tavern. Waiting in the room at the top were two beings of such beauty, he nearly stumbled on the final step. One had long, flowing hair, the color of the sunwell itself, and the other kept her ebon hair cropped short. After several long moments of wordless, lust-filled glances, a realization struck him. He was looking into the face of the enemy. He unsheathed his mighty sword, bathing the blood elves in its pulsating glow. The elf with radiant hair spoke first. Goodness, it looks like someone is ready for battle. She placed her hand on the tip of his sword, lowering it with gentle pressure as she crossed in front of him, always keeping her head cocked in his direction. Do you believe in love at first sight, or should I walk by again? Marcus leaned in close, carelessly pressing the hardened steel against her. He whispered something quietly in her ear and pulled away, eagerly searching her face for a reaction. No, I won't do that. But my sister will, the blonde giggled. The dark-haired one silently raised a single eyebrow, nodding and shrugging her delicate shoulders at the same time. With a subtle gesture, her body glowed with an intense inner fire, burning away what little clothing she wore. As Marcus's muscular arms wrapped around her, she whispered something to him. A symbol, unseen by Marcus, momentarily appeared above his head and surrounded him in a white glow. That feels amazing. What did you do? He asked. Fortitude, my lord. You will need it. It was then that he noticed she was literally levitating off the ground, weightless in his arms. His mind began to spin as countless scenarios played out in his head. His strong hands began to... The remaining pages are shrouded in mist. As you can see, these books get longer as we go on, and they will continue to do so. We have a few left. Now, the next steamy romance novel actually is an interesting one because it has two versions. You have the steamy romance novel, I'm in Love with a Robot, that you can get from the Blingtron 4000 package of gifts. And it simply reads, the pages are too heavily smudged with oil to be read. So you never know what's in that one. There's also a mint condition version one that is found in Talador. But even that one that you can get at the back of Kita's Hideaway on the Orani coast of northeastern Talador, even that one simply reads, mint condition copy. Every page appears to be a highly technical schematic. But it also comes with the stone grinder companion pet in the back of that cave. So it's worthwhile to get no matter what. The next steamy romance novel that you can be getting is actually dropped by Ashron Quartermasters, Crafticus Mindbender, and Dazirin in Draenor. And that is a steamy romance novel, Savage Passions. A trail of dust followed the once white stallion as he galloped through the garrison gates, stopping abruptly at the stables. Raven, the stable master, rushed to the weary mountain rider. Lord Marcus, let me help. Raven's strong, tanned arm took the rider's hand in his own, pulling him off in a quick, smooth motion. He did not immediately let go, staring in disbelief at the paladin's heavily stained armor. Seeing concern on the man's face, Marcus clasped his shoulder and smiled. Fear not, old friend. Only a little of it is my own. Raven hugged him fiercely. That is good to hear. Yes, I'm fine. The journey was long and often hard, but I have returned victorious, Marcus exclaimed, as he pulled a bulging sack from beneath his armor, placing it gingerly in Raven's rough, steady hands. The inquisitive stablemaster cupped the bag, squeezing gently to discern the contents without unwrapping the package. Don't be coy. You know what's in there. But I have something even better for you, Marcus said with a smile. Raven closed his eyes. He held out his hands and spoke calmly. Give it to me, please. His arms flexed slightly as he felt something heavy, strangely warm, and smooth along its length. Oh, this is... familiar. Okay, yes, I know that part. An enchanted sword. Raven released the glowing weapon from one hand, letting it swing in front of him. Marcus looked down and raised his eyebrows. I'm glad you like it. Certainly it's not the first you've held. Never one like this, Raven said with a wink. We need to work on that grip. It's too tight. Perhaps you'll have some time for some practice, Marcus asked, peering into Raven's dark brown eyes. Raven grinned. I'll go tie up your horse. The remaining pages are not yet written, This appears to be a work in progress. Our next steamy romance novel, which is from the Legion expansion, and you can be obtaining it from humans mostly in High Mountain, and that is a steamy romance novel. Got milk? So there I was, surrounded by at least 100 murlocs, the heavily muscled man proclaimed, gesturing in a wide arc. The tawny Tauren gasped in amazement. "Whatever did you do?" Her voice had a brawny, muscular tone to it. "The only thing I could do, my lovely." Marcus patted the sword resting on his thigh. "I brought them to justice." "Oh, with just a dagger? You're so brave." Tada cautiously reached for the blade, but pulled her hand away at the last second. Marcus bristled. "What? This is a two-handed sword, enchanted to the hilt. Perhaps not as big as you've seen, but I know a few tricks to make it sing." Tanda smiled demurely, fluttering her enormous eyelashes. She picked up one piece of cheese and held it close to Marcus's lips. "Try this. It's homemade." The handsome paladin stammered. No, I'm lactose intolerant." Tanda placed the cheese back in the bowl. "Oh, are you sure? Does that mean you can't tolerate me?" The buxom Tauren stepped forward, pressing herself against Marcus. The substantial height difference placed his face squarely in her chest. Unable to see, he flailed in protest, finally finding purchase on her firm backside. His muffled, apologetic sounds only made her giggle and squeeze him more tightly. Just as his other hand found her tail, the light dimmed as an imposing figure moved into the doorway. "What the?" Tanda exclaimed. "Bax! No!" Marcus pulled his hand away and his head, and he gasped for air, looking at the angry Tauren with wide eyes. It's not what it looks like." Bax charged, ramming into Marcus while uttering his challenge. "You mess with the bull, you get the horns." Marcus reeled and caught himself, digging his heel into the dirt. Seizing a horn in each hand, he held the Tauren's head down, fighting against its tremendous strength. Bax forced his head up, grunting and spitting in anger, only to have it repeatedly pushed down. They locked eyes for a moment, and with a final heave of explosive force, Bax wrenched himself free. The powerful Tauren swung his arms out wide as if to crush Marcus in a mighty hug. "Blades of light!" exclaimed the paladin. A huge, pulsating sword thrust up from the ground between the combatants, tearing through armor and clothing, searing the thick chest hair of Marcus, and cutting a fine line into the Tauren's muscular chest. Before they could move again, Tanda raised her hooved leg into the air and brought it down with a warlike force. The man and bull wobbled, clearly stunned. "Stop it! Both of you!" Marcus regained his composure and looked at Tanda, and then to Bax. Fur was ruffled, and the bare parts of their leathery skin glistened with sweat. As they all stared down at one another, the ridiculously good-looking Marcus spoke up and said, "Well, since we're mostly undressed already. The story does go on, but your good taste prevents you from reading any more. Well, that was definitely a interesting romance novel, and they only keep getting more interesting from there. Our next steamy romance novel, Of Elven Bondage, can be obtained from using a steamy romance novel kit, which is available to inscriptionists. So here we go with Of Elven Bondage. The weight of his fist crashed into the side of the ogre's face with a meaty thunk. The bulbous goon teetered for a moment like a marionette cut loose from its strings before falling into a heap atop his unconscious sibling. The Drektooth brothers may have been feared throughout the land, but the courage of Sir Crispin Greymane had won the day once again. The brave hero had no time to pause and admire his handiwork, not when Lady Moonshade remained shackled to the wall. Greymane strode to her side, each step as graceful as a ram of Dunmoreau. "You're unhurt, my lady. I trust these brutes didna cause you harm." She breathed a relieved sigh as he broke away the bonds that held her wrists and ankles. "Your swift arrival saw to that, noble champion," she answered. The night elf's glowing eyes beamed upon him like stars on a cloudless night. "The greatest suffering was enduring the ogre's lecherous glances. My leather armor was damaged during my capture, and several pieces seem to have fallen away." She made a half-hearted attempt to cover the bareness of her taut midriff. "Of course, a knight performing his duty would not notice such a quandary," he assured her, taking her hand and lightly massaging her bruised wrist as she got to her feet. Standing at her full height, Lady Moonshade was at least 3 heads taller than her savior, if not more. She puzzled him a moment. "Forgive me, good sir, but I cannot discern if you are the shortest human I have ever met or the tallest dwarf." His white teeth flashed through the thickness of his beard like snow caps on a mountain ridge. "I like to think I'm the best of both, good lady." He gestured to the doorway. "A spacious carriage awaits to convey you back home. I assure you my driver will not disturb us, as I personally see to your recovery. I will do my best to ensure that the ride is to your liking." A playful smile danced about her lips. "I hope I can rely on your driver's discretion. I fear the rest of my fragile armor might fall away at any moment." The ruggedly handsome knight bowed and flashed a confident wink. "Why, my dear, I'm positively counting on it." "Oh, Sir Greymane!" She swooned, falling into his arms. He guided her towards the waiting coach, stepping over the unconscious ogres on the floor. This story continues for many more chapters, all laden with vehicle metaphors. And as you can see, that one had no Marcus at all. In fact, the next couple of steamy romance novels, you can tell, are not penned by the same author. They are penned again by using the Steamy Romance novel kit, so they are not the self-proclaimed life story of Marcus, at least for now. So our next one, like I said, obtainable by the Steamy Romance novel kit, is A Steamy Romance, Nightborn of the Living Dead. She accepted the chalice of wine with a bat of her long lashes. "I really shouldn't, Lord Gravesbane. My mother would never approve." Nonsense, my dear Alonia, the nobleman answered. You are 10,000 years old. I'm sure your mother would forgive you for indulging. Just this once. She giggled. It's not the wine, my lord. Rather, it's the notion of a nightborn spending her evening in the company of someone so charming, he offered. I was going to say decrepit. My morals are not quite that far gone, I assure you, he replied, his good eye drifting up and down the length of her flowing gown. I'm sure your mother would find me most endearing. Oh, would I? Said a sharp voice. Crispin Gravesbane turned to see another nightborn framed in the doorway. Though her attire was less inviting than her daughter's, her face and body were a mirror of Elonia's own. He approached and bowed, hastily kicking aside the kneecap that fell to the floor. I am Lord Crispin Gravesbane, at your service. Do I have the honor of meeting Lady Miriana? You do, she answered coldly, casting a harsh glance toward Elonia. I fear you are toying with me, good lady, he smiled, careful to hold his jaw in place. Surely you must be Elonia's sister, not her mother. A faint blush flashed across Lady Mariana's cheeks. You flatter me, my lord. Her voice softened. It has been centuries since anyone has mistaken us for siblings. Nonsense, he insisted, taking her hand and guiding her towards the couch. He sat down between the two indigo-skinned elves. Perhaps after we share a bit of wine, we'll find out what else you and your daughter have in common. Oh, Lord Gravesbane! Mariana swooned. She took Elonia's hand, sharing a furtive smile with her daughter. Perhaps it's time we introduce you to the true secrets of the Shaldori. Subsequent pages seem to have been scribbled over in Nightborn profanities. So our next Steamy Romance novel, also obtained by the Steamy Romance Novel Kit, is actually the further adventures of Lord Gravesbane. So let's jump into a Steamy Romance novel, Waves of Desire. Lord Gravesbane stared out through the porthole, watching the waves rise and fall in time with the aching that tormented him inside. How long had she kept him waiting here, in the cabin of this luxury schooner? He felt the keen edge of his desire growing more insistent, spurring his impatience. At last, the cabin door swung open. She paused in the doorway, torchlight playing about the hem of her low-cut silken gown as the shadows danced upon her pale Sindori skin. Am I late, my lord? She asked, chewing on the fullness of her lower lip. He found himself speechless as his jaw dropped to the floor. He knelt to pick it up, rising as he snapped it back in place. Some things are worth waiting for, Lady Sunskin. He held out his hand, beckoning her closer. For a moment, a look of uncertainty crossed the highborn's brow. Her shallow breaths hung heavy with hesitation and longing. She brushed her fingertips across the cold, pallid skin of his cheek. I hope your desiccation doesn't hinder your enthusiasm, Lord Gravesbane. He took her hand, and he kissed it with his one good lip, Fear not, my darling. My jaw isn't what it used to be, but my tongue remains limber as ever. Oh, Lord Gravesbane, she swooned, falling into his arms. He relished the warmth of her skin as he guided her towards the leather harness hanging over his bed. The story continues for many more chapters, laden with porthole puns. And as you can see, they get a little bit more steamy as we go on, without a doubt. Our next steamy romance novel is tossing us back into the steamy world of Marcus, and this is another one with 2 copies. You can get the unsigned copy. I don't remember where, though, but somewhere in Borealis. But once you have the unsigned copy of it, you can take it to Noah Scribeson, who is just outside of Scribes and Nobles in Hook Point in Borealis, and get your own signed copy of a steamy romance novel, Stormy Seas. Marcus awoke with a grunt, squinting to make out the dark shadows around him. He was sitting on a cold wooden floor, and the air was ripe with the scent of a long night. The room rocked back and forth, or was that just the hangover? "Where am I?" he mumbled to himself. A sultry laugh echoed as a strong, shapely figure moved towards him. Marcus rubbed his eyes and focused his senses. She smelled of leather, salt, and exotic spices. As he looked into the woman's steel-gray eyes, he became aware of the bars between them. "Am I in a cell?" he thought to himself. "Is this one of Madame Goya's rooms?" he mused further. "You're in the brig, in case you haven't figured it out," the voluptuous pirate stated, with more than a hint of amusement. Marcus stood shakily, composing himself with a roguish smirk, and then spoke. "I knew that. It's the brig. I'm on a ship. Of course." The woman leaned in closer, gripping the bars with surprising intensity. "Yes, on a ship, at full mast apparently," she added, with a flirtatious glance down, then back up to his face. Marcus grinned in response, bowing close enough to whisper through the bars, "Half-mast, although the winds do seem to be strengthening." He blew gently, catching the thick black hair in the seductive currents of his breath. She pulled away with a fleeting glance of reluctance. "I'm just here to see if you wanted dinner." She forced a stale piece of bread through the bars. Marcus plucked the morsel from her hand. "I don't want anything hard right now." He dropped the rigid roll and took her hand, tracing a line from her calloused fingers to the anchor tattooed on her forearm. "Do you have any Kultarin fare? I've heard it's famous for its succulence. A rare pleasure to the tongue." A silence followed his words, interrupted by the sound of the cell door creaking open and a cutlass clattering to the floor. Marcus silently pointed to a belaying pin on the far wall and raised an eyebrow. The broad-shouldered woman purred. "Oh, I'd have never pegged you for that." The rest of the book takes a dive into the turbulent seas of passion. This book also comes with an about the author. Noah Scribeson has traveled Azeroth in search of inspiration for his characters and stories. He claims that research is the key to genuine storytelling, and he is always willing to go to great lengths in finding the right muse. And we only have one more steamy romance novel to go through. This final steamy romance novel also comes in the signed and unsigned copy, and that is found in the Blue Dragon quadrant of Valdrakken. You can pick up the unsigned copy of the steamy romance novel and then take it to Noah Scribeson in Valdrakken, where not only is Noah signing copies of his book, but he is also reading selected paragraphs out loud to his fans who are swooning all around him. If you haven't found him in Valdrakken, it is entirely worth the trip to go and find him. And so now, for now, our very last steamy romance novel, at least until the war within re-inspires our author. And that is a steamy romance novel, The Lusty Draconian Mage. Surrounded on all sides by ravening cultists, our brave hero Marcus finds himself in a situation even his formidable skills and bulging muscles cannot overcome. As the horde closed in for the final blow, sensing that even his legendary stamina had run low, he steeled himself to take as many of them with him as possible. "Come on, then," he quipped, manfully unafraid even in the face of certain doom. "Don't keep me waiting." Just as their charge was about to hit home, the world erupted into searing heat and blazing light. As the flames receded and the firestorm passed, Marcus found himself standing alone, blinking in a field of ash. The crunch of fresh char and a low feminine chuckle revealed the presence of his savior. Turning, he found himself approached by a vision as beauteous as his prior situation had been grim. Wrapped in a daringly cut robe that clung tightly to her buxom figure and revealed much of her flawless, if unusually red-tinged skin, the figure picked her way across the charred ground, her fingers deftly sliding along the shaft of what was unmistakably a mage's staff as she idly stroked it. "Thank you, my lady," Marcus said as he bowed, his eyes trailing along her shapely legs, past her wide hips and taut core, and lingering upon ample chest as he slowly straightened before reaching a face that was as lovely as it was unconcerned by the destruction that she had just unleashed. A pair of sweeping horns topped her form, only adding to the heady mixture of grandeur and danger. It seemed a waste to lose such a fine, heroic specimen, such as yourself, to this rabble, she responded, her gaze wandering as unabashedly as his. You showed such impressive skill and stamina during the battle that I could not help but intervene, she said, her skin flushing an even richer shade of red as her inspection continued. If there is anything that I, or Drake Piercer here, Marcus said, flexing his muscles toned from years of adventure as he sheathed his long blade home, can do for you, we are in your debt. Anything, she replied, her bounteous chest straining against the scant confinement that her robe provided, even as her yellow eyes twinkled mischievously at the name of his sword. Anything, he continued. I never leave a debt unsatisfied. He raised a calloused hand to gently stroke the generous curves of her impressive rack, feeling the rough texture of her horns scraping his skin. Shuddering lightly at his touch, she licked her full lips, pursing them enticingly for a long moment before blowing a stream of crimson fire out across our hero. Shocked, Marcus felt not the searing pain he had expected, but a gentle, invigorating warmth as the tongues of flame licked across his chiseled body, burning away his road-stained leathers, but only caressing the tanned flesh beneath. Much better, she purred, slowly eyeing him from top to bottom. The breath of a red dragoness can bring life as easily as take it. I trust my flame has not harmed you. On the contrary, Marcus replied, as her hot breath played teasingly across his skin. I feel positively engorged with life. Stepping forward, she pressed her heaving frame against the knight, grabbing his newly bared sword by the hilt appreciatively. Let's see about your weapon earning its name, then, hero. The book quickly abandons even the flimsy excuse for a plot that it had maintained up until this point. And like I said, they just get more steamy as they go on. So I am very curious to see what the next book in the War Within will actually contain. And with that, thank you for joining as we sat here in Featherbeard's hovel and read through the steamy romance novels written mostly by Noah Scribeson when they aren't written by the character themselves, using their lusty kit that they can get if they are trained in inscription. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed these books for the silliness that they are, and I hope that you enjoy the fact that World of Warcraft puts these fun and silly little things in. There are many, many readable books in the game, and I highly recommend that if you come across a book that you can click on and read, you do so. Some are funny, some are informative, some are full of lore, and some are a bit steamy. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. I will see you next week when we will be finishing up the Jade Forest exploration in Pandaria. But until then, I will see you next time. Say goodbye, Beryl.